You can hear me? Good. Oh, you can't hear me because you don't have your headphones
Hey,
in.
hey, everyone, including Eric. Look at Eric has joined us before I even had my headphones on. Hang on one second here. You know, I really need to be, since we're live, I really need to be better about getting all this stuff ready to go before. All right, let's see here. Uh, in, in, hey,
Hey, this got to be
hey.
some record that I actually was here before your headphones got on. But I think what you're saying, we're not live people. That's I'm not anyway. I'm not a live person. I think I'm pre-recorded.
Not live. That,
Yeah.
there's so many connotations to that statement. So so you have missed out in the past on all the fun stuff that we need to do here. Let me make sure that you are. Oh, there you are. Look at that.
Here I am.
So
Oh, that's too
beautiful.
bad. You should just go put your picture back up there. I don't need
Oh
to see
yeah.
me.
Well, here. How about that?
No, no, please not
Oh,
that.
actually, you know what? If we're going to do
There,
this, let's get that
there we go.
adjusted. Yeah.
That's
Because
cool that you can do that, actually. That's totally cool.
yeah, it's really slick.
Oh, it really is.
I'm loving this. I was talking to Chuck the other day, and he's been playing with it. He only just started playing with Ecamm Live 4, and he's been having some trouble
Oh,
with it, getting his stuff, getting people into the call, and then also going out live. I guess he's had some issues with it. So
he's been using Ecamm, but just Ecamm Live or Ecamm 4
no,
is new
he
for him.
yeah, Ecamm 4 is new for him, but he was having trouble. He often uses Zoom. He uses Zoom, and then but he was intrigued by the new feature where you can. Oh, I can't think of the term. Let me find the term here so I get it right. I probably can't even.
Find the term.
ISO. ISO is the term. I always forget ISO because I think of cameras when I hear ISO,
Yeah.
but it's isolated video recording. And
Oh,
that's
okay.
something you can do with Ecamm Live 4 now if you have an M series or Apple Silicon Mac.
Okay.
If you don't,
Isolated.
well, too bad. So sad.
Too
You can't
bad.
do it.
What is a what is the isolated video recording? Just something where you're just recording video without audio or what?
Yeah, well, it's actually really slick. So the way it works is nobody's watching. I wish people were watching.
He said you could try it. Yeah.
Yeah. So the way it works is with Ecamm Live 4, you can have up to 10 participants in a call like this. So I know you can see this. And before we could do up to 4, so I could do something like that,
Okay. Yeah.
or
Yeah.
4 guests. I could do up to 4 guests, I think it was. So you could do this and you could have, me and you and 3 other folks in there.
Yep.
Well, now you can have up to 10 in
Oh,
there,
that's like
which is very slick. Well, what the isolated video recording does is it records each person's input, regardless of this, this pretty framing I'm putting around everything. It records
okay.
each person's input separately. So I can bring all that, if I wanted to, I could bring all that into Final Cut, do my editing,
Right.
regardless of these decorations, regardless of this frame here.
Right.
Regardless of all that, it just records the pure video. And same thing if I
Video.
had multi cameras. If I had, I'm using the iSight, which is why my video isn't as sharp and crisp as it could be. I'm actually
Yeah. Me
thinking
too.
about either pulling one of my old video cameras out of service and just putting it on a low tripod here, or or using my old action cam, the What brand is that? The action cams.
You're not talking about not those little handheld ones, right?
Yeah,
No.
the little tiny ones.
Oh,
Shoot, what's that brand? What's that brand of action cam?
I can't think of
I
it.
have a fake one here. This is not a real one.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you're talking about GoPro.
GoPro. That's it. I'm sorry. I
There you go.
apologize, Mr. GoPro
No.
and Ms. GoPro people. I completely forgot your name, which is not great. I realize that's not great. But I have a Series 3. This is not it. I have a Series 3 Black. And I'm not using it for anything. I thought it would be cool. I thought I'd have fun with it, and I don't do diddly with
Anything.
it. So I thought, well, I could just hook it up, put it on a tripod back here. And as you saw with this cheapo one I have here, this does 4K,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think the Series 3 Black does 2.5K, or I don't think it does 4K. I think it's somewhere short of that.
What was I going to say? I've always been kind of thinking I wanted to try out continuity camera or camo, put my iPhone up there. I keep
Yeah.
thinking I'm going to do it, and then I never do it. But I ordered this from Etsy, and
Oh,
it
yeah.
basically you stick your phone in there, and it just sits on your monitor like that, and it works pretty good. The only problem with it is tilting.
Yeah.
But I don't think any of them really have a good tilt mechanism. But this was like $10 on. Actually came from Ireland,
3D
and
printed?
the person that sent it actually provided some candy too. Like I'm sure it's like candy, and obviously candy from Ireland, because I wasn't really sure what it was, but it was good. So it was
Yeah.
very nice.
Nice. Very nice. 3D printed, I take it.
Yeah, that's kind of what it looks like, and it's got some padding in there, obviously, to hold the phone. So it must, it's got like this. I don't know if you can see the little light gray padding. So it must be something else, because
Well,
I can imagine. I can't imagine you can 3D print that.
no, but you can stick it in there, of course.
Yeah.
Well, that's of course my other option. This is my iPhone 8 Plus. So
Oh
that
yeah.
continuity camera, this would be a great, or
Perfect.
camo. I'd have to use camo with this, right?
No. Oh yeah, because 10 and up. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I don't believe the 8 does continuity camera. So
Right.
but I can use camo with it,
Right.
and that could be my camera, and that would eliminate my problem with continuity camera. Is I don't want to take my phone out of use
Yes.
for 2
Yeah.
hours.
Right. Yep.
I just don't want to do it.
No, and that's part of the reason why I haven't messed with it either, because I don't want to take it out of use.
Yeah.
But I do have an older camera that I could use, or older phone that I could use for one or the other. The other reason is because it's a lot clearer than like the studio display camera, and
Yeah.
I don't know if I want it that clear on my face. I don't know if I want people seeing me that clear.
I didn't realize until I was okay. So last week I helped someone set up their new iMac, 24-inch iMac. Beautiful, beautiful machine. Their old 2015, I think it was a 2015 iMac, was starting to have problems. I believe the drive was failing on it. It sure seemed like it. It was passing tests and diagnostics and disk utility in Recovery Council, but it still was crash. I mean, it was consistently crashing on her. It was gray screening as she was using it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't any one particular application. It wasn't any one particular thing she was doing. It was just continually crashing. So something was corrupted in the operating system. And certainly one course of action is to erase the drive, reinstall macOS, restore her data, and go with it. And as we talked about the costs of doing that versus the costs of a new Mac and all that, she said, look, it's a 7-year-old computer. She uses it for business. It just made sense to her to get a new one. she didn't want to mess with transferring over everything. As easy as it is to transfer stuff from one Mac to another, which we've talked about on the show before,
Yep.
she didn't want to mess with it. She just wanted to make sure it was done right, so she gave it to me. She said, here's the new Mac, here's my old Mac, here's my Time Machine backup. Do what
Go
you
for
need
it.
to do and make it
Yeah.
work. And so I did. And one of the things I played with to make sure it was working for her, because she does a lot with Zoom, is getting the latest Apple Silicon Zoom on it, and then just testing it, just making sure it was working okay. I didn't realize how freaking clear and sharp the camera is on those new Macs until I got a chance to play with it last week, because I don't have one to experience that with. Yes, I've got a Mac Studio, but I don't have a camera with that one. I've got this,
Right.
which is 720. And,
Yeah.
we're going out at 720. I really don't feel like for our purposes, we need to go higher than
No.
that.
No.
We could go up to 4K, for goodness sakes.
Yeah.
And the only reason I'd want,
We don't need to do that.
no, the only reason I'd need something like this, 4K, is just to give me a sharper image.
Yeah, exactly. And while you might be good sharper, I don't think I would be good. Well, the only thing is that the chicken fan probably having that come out sharper, I'm sure would actually increase audience. So, I mean, that's probably something that would be good. But other than that,
Just having the chicken fan host this instead of me might be a good course of action as well. You
if we
never
just
know.
had a camera aimed at the chicken fan, just sitting, you just see the numbers going up and up.
I wouldn't have to worry about, all this gray hair and
Right.
and shaving. I wouldn't have to shave in the morning, for goodness
Yeah.
sakes. It just,
Right. Me either. Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be.
just let it go. But
Yeah.
where was I going with that? Oh, so anyway, if I did have a separate camera or I had multiple cameras, the input from each of those cameras would be recorded in its own track. Ecamm could always do isolated audio recording. I can tell it to record your audio separate from my audio, and I can do that now, in fact, but it never did the
That's
isolated video or ISO video recording, and now it does.
That's
So that's a huge draw. You do have to have Apple Silicon for that to work. And let's see, what's the other thing? Oh, multi-streaming.
multi-streaming.
Yeah. Is this going to be a problem? Do I have to
Yeah,
come and
apparently
take
it
that
is.
phone? Do I have to
I
take
thought I
that phone out
said
of your
it too.
hands?
Well, there's an earthquake, so that's the earthquake alert.
Oh,
Which I don't know why.
happening now?
Yeah, but it's not anything major.
I don't see the camera shaking or anything.
No, right, and it's obviously not nearby me. So I thought,
Well,
there we go.
Hopefully it's not
It's on
anything
now.
bad, and hopefully nobody's in trouble because
Nope.
of it.
Yeah, nope, everything's good. I've now turned on the podcasting focus mode, so we should be good.
I just flip the little switch on the side and say, just don't even bother me.
Yeah, then my watch still goes though. That was actually my watch that went burning. Like,
I never have audio on my watch.
I know most people don't. I should probably.
I find it incredibly annoying. Well, one, the whole notification system on Apple's iOS devices bugs me. I don't need a ding for every single email that comes in.
Right. Yeah.
I would much rather that it accumulates them
Or just even texts.
or dings once. Ding once.
Yes.
The very first time an email comes in, ding, to let me know that there's email waiting. And then as the subsequent messages come in, just stack them in the notification, but don't keep dinging for each one. And it's particularly a problem on, Monday mornings, like usually around 8:30, 9, when all the newsletters start pushing out their stuff. And it's all automated. So, they start pushing out all their stuff and it ding. What is it? Ding. What? Ding. Ding. Like, oh, good gracious. So I keep audio on the phone, but I generally keep it off all the time on the watch. And
Yeah.
even still, with the audio muted, if I ask S Lady something, it'll speak to me. So
Right. Right.
that's
Oh
rare.
yeah, and it
Yeah.
still works. You know what made me turn it on was I was using the hourly chime, and there was like a
Mm.
little bird. They have like a regular chime sound and then a bird sound. Yeah, exactly. And it's a different bird sound almost every hour. It's like it's weird. And so I kind of thought that was cool, but in order to hear it, you have to have the audio on. And but I'm wondering that because just like you, the email I have it set up so only VIPs I get chimed. So like if you sent an email, I would get chimed, but not something like from Bed Bath and Beyond or something,
I don't believe
whatever.
you. I don't believe you.
No, I know. That's email. I'm having trouble with text, and I don't know what the deal is, but um, I am. It's so annoying. But anyway, my wife and I we have a family group chat, and they'll get talking in there, and my watch will be ding, 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 ding.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it'll
Mm-hmm.
just. I'm like, can't you take it off to a private chat with you? You know, oh,
So is
it's
the
just
is the bird sounds, is that native to WatchOS?
yeah,
Really?
yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's like a
I think
yeah, it's just it's only you've only got two options, bird or chime. And the chime was if the chime sounded like an old Casio watch, I would definitely use that. But it's kind of more of a heavy duty. Like my dad used to have this Casio watch, and it would do two beeps on the hour and like a
mhm.
single beep, quick beep on the half hour. And I don't know why. Probably because I was a kid, I thought that was really cool. But
Yeah.
it was that little, the tiny speaker. You know how those old watches sounded like.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I
And if
was
it
looking
was,
to see if I had one handy. I know I've got one sitting around here, one of my old watches. Um,
yeah.
yeah. I even have one of the original Microsoft smartwatches.
Oh, those
Remember
are,
those?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, it worked. It was kind of like the Moto 360 that I had. You know, it worked. It kind of did what it was supposed to do, but it just like, oh, the data link.
Right.
That's what that was called. The Timex
That's right. The
DataLink.
data link.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
Microsoft Timex DataLink, and it was cool. I mean, you could store
It was,
information in it and retrieve it, and I don't I don't remember offhand what I kept in it, but it was it was kind of neat for
yeah.
the time that it came out. It must have come out what 20 years ago. It came out in the 90s, I
Oh,
think.
yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
no. Yeah, probably. Um, yeah, there's kind of a cult. But I think people out there still use it, for stuff. I don't know exactly or really, I know that was a totally cool thing.
Yeah.
That's kind of
I,
neat.
I have the calculator watch. I've got there were some really cool things that were done with analog watches, back in the day. My mom bought me a watch in the 70s that had an old car on it. It didn't say, this is a Model T or whatever. It was just an old car, and instead of a second hand, it had the wheels of the car spun,
Oh, that's cool.
both wheels. So it had
That's
two
neat.
wheels. It wasn't just one. It was both wheels spun every second, and it was really really cool. And that was one that my mom
Yeah.
had given me. And I had that, and I've got a ton of not genuine Swatch watches, but remember when the Swatch watch craze hit, and
Yep.
everybody and their mother released a Swatch clone, and
Yeah.
you could get them free, free with purchase. So I know I have an M&M's Swatch like watch, and heck, Apple had one. That no, you know what? That was me. That was
I was
me
gonna say, I'm like,
because
you gotta be kidding me.
I was going to say before I went down a different rat hole, I was going to say the one thing I miss because I have the phone muted is I can't do this.
It's 12:20. Good afternoon.
Right? That's
Yep. It's
that's
awesome.
absolutely my favorite feature, but I
Yep.
can't I can't do it. I can't listen to Mickey unless I unmute my watch.
Yeah, that's the thing. There is a cost to muting your watch. I know that. Yeah, that was the other thing too. I would leave it unmuted for him too, because I was like, doggone it, or even like if you hold two fingers on it, I think it'll tell you the time on any watch face.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if it'll do it now that I. Oh, it's wow. That sounded really bad.
It's
Um,
12:21.
Well, it's just a single tap for Mickey, but
well, yeah, because Mickey will do it no matter what. I think everything else you have to hold two fingers down for like a few seconds.
well,
Um,
I only have two watch faces on my watch, and the other one is
It's 12:21. Good afternoon.
is Minnie. So I really only have the two, so I can't
Yeah.
test. I
So
can't test the theory.
So you really don't need any. You're not. I was just gonna say, I really wish Apple would create or allow other people to create watch faces and do more of the classic, the from the digital era, like the first, what was it, Pulsar, the
Mhm.
kind of digital look, and even
Yeah.
like the Casio watches, or even just analog, some of the, and I don't know if they could do some of that without getting sued, or I don't know, but anyway, the gears they had, um, when they did, you remember the iPod Nano around the 2000,
Sure.
2010,
Yeah.
2011 era?
And people strapped
And
them to their
I
wrist.
had one of those, a little square, and I had a watch band, and I wore it like a watch, and it
I know.
really wasn't much bigger than this, but it had a bunch of cool watch faces, including Kermit and Miss Piggy, I think, and also I think it did have Mickey, but it had a lot of other cool watch faces too. And I wish
Yeah.
they would kind of take a cue from that. It wasn't as cool as the watch, but still, I liked the faces were cool.
Our friend Lisa used her iPod Nano as a hair clip.
Did you?
Yeah. She clipped it into her hair. Yeah, she sent me a picture of it once, and
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is great.
I don't really know how that worked with the headphones. You got it clipped into your
Yeah.
hair, and now you've got this wire coming down and going into your ears, and because they didn't have Bluetooth, so you couldn't have done that.
No,
It was
right.
wired. Yeah.
Though you could add Bluetooth to it.
To the little
You
green,
could-
like the one with the little the controls in the front of it.
Well, it had of course, it had a 30-pin connector, but there was like a little, it was like kind of rounded off, but it would just slide into the 30-pin connector, and it would give you a little Bluetooth. It was like a little Bluetooth antenna, and it worked.
Wow.
Because I did use it, especially when I had it in watch mode, and yeah.
Oh,
I know.
you
That
know
was a
what?
cool-
I think we're talking about two different ones. She had the one that didn't have a face on it. It just had the controls.
Oh, the iPod Shuffle.
Oh, the shuffle. Oh, okay. See, I don't
Yeah.
even have my iPods in the right order.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that-
Yes, hers was the shuffle. I'm sorry. Yeah.
And those got so small that you could use it as a hair clip.
That's
and
what
not
she
even
did.
know
Yeah.
it. Yeah. Because I was thinking, like, how would she see the face? But yeah, with an iPod Shuffle,
Yep.
you didn't need to. And then you could click it to change songs.
Yeah.
And that particular one that was really tiny actually would have a voice in there and tell you, like, I would load a podcast in there, and it would tell you for Mac guys only, whatever. And yeah, that was cool.
I had one iPod. I had in fact, the box isn't up there anymore. I used to have the box up on top there. Now the box that's up there is for my iSight.
Oh,
They
cool.
had awesome boxes back at that time. That was an
yeah.
experience. It was an experience unboxing an Apple device then.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And it's still cool, like that iMac. It's neat how you pull back the sides, and then it just kind of
Right.
automatically, origami like unfolds so that you can lift the
Folds.
iMac out of there. That's cool. But the experience of unpacking something like the
Yeah.
iSight, where you slip the outer case off and then it opened up and it had pictures around the inner box, and then you open it up and there was the iSight, and then you had to take that. It's really cool.
So you have the original iSight?
Yeah.
That's what you're using now?
No. That's what's
Oh,
in the box up there on the
that's
top of
what's in
my
the box.
shelf.
Okay.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
this is the iSight. No, if I I probably would. Yeah, I used to have it sitting on top of my computer over there, and it was FireWire, of course. It wasn't
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
USB; it was FireWire. So yeah, without a FireWire adapter, it wouldn't be much use. But I think it
It
probably would work. I would think it would work.
probably would. Yeah.
Yeah,
I I used to that was a perfect. The original iSight was a perfect little camera.
it
I
was a
mean,
great camera.
and you could even turn it off or turn it on. And
Yep.
I actually got, I don't know if it was from Mac Ally or Ally Mac Ally, but it was like a FireWire. It had like a little base, like a little something to hold it, but it had like a bendable snake kind of thing that was a
Oh,
FireWire. But you could plug the camera in the top of it and then aim it whatever direction you wanted to. And I would use
that's
that with the desktop, and that worked really well.
that's one step up from what Apple offered. They had a little magnetic base that you would attach the camera to, and then the intent was you stuck it to the top of your cinema display,
Yeah.
so
Yep. I remember that.
it would connect magnetically to that, and that worked really well. And when I got this new desk, and it wouldn't sit on top of the display anymore, I actually got an old, well, not an old. It was a spare, the outlet boxes that go in the wall behind the wall
Oh
board.
yeah. Yeah.
And you screw your
Yeah.
outlets into it. They're the little metal square boxes. Well, I had one of those extra, so I set it on the shelf above the monitor and used the magnetic to just stick it to that, and that worked.
Oh, that's cool.
It
That's
was,
great.
yeah,
Yeah.
very MacGyver, but it worked.
Yeah. No. MacGyver's great.
All I needed was some chewing gum to help hold it in place a little bit better, and then it would have been
Yes.
even better.
Ah,
Oh, let's see.
sweet.
So I don't remember what we were talking about. That's the joy of this intro half hour or so. By the way, I should have said this at the very beginning. Anyone listening to this, anyone watching this on YouTube later, and I said this last episode, and I'll say it again now, I put chapter markers in so that you can skip ahead to the part that you want to watch. So while I should have said this at the beginning, I'm saying it now, which is probably a little too late because the next chapter marker will be us starting the show. So um, apologies for that. But if you
But
made it this far, you've
you'll
enjoyed
just
our
the show starts
conversation.
here.
Yeah, you've enjoyed our conversation about watches and iSight cameras and iPod shuffles as hair clips and all that fun stuff. Oh, and there's a helicopter going by outside. I don't know if you can hear that.
Yeah, just a little.
A little bit. We have a hospital just maybe about 3/4 of a mile that way. And yeah, every once in a while, helicopter will come in, and you always hope
You get a med flight.
Everyone's okay. But
I know. I always kind of hate that. I know.
yeah, there's a reason the helicopter's going there, and just hope it's
Yep.
not for anything too terribly serious.
Yeah.
So I know we're at 27:50, but by the time we actually start, it'll be 28 minutes. So I wrote down 28 minutes. And you're ready for our conversation today, I think.
Yeah. I believe I am.
Other than your unwillingness to read my text messages.
I did read them. I did. I can't believe that happened. But what's so weird is, did it look like it was red on your end?
Like what was red? Oh, no.
Your text messages?
No. I just figured you were ignoring me.
No, I was. You just kind of like say, "Hey, what's good?" Well, now I'm just going to go in there and check. Because like I said, I have your little avatar pinned up there, and so usually it shows like a little bubble up there when there's a new message. Sometimes messages doesn't show the badge, and if I'm not around and I don't hear the little communicator, I have the Star Trek communicator chirp. It's kind of the one.
Of course you do.
I think from Discovery. Anyway, and so if I don't hear that, then I always check it later on, but I kind of rely on that little speech bubble thing being by the avatar or a little dot being by the message. And I don't know. I guess I'm gonna have to figure out something else.
Well, just to let everyone know what we're talking about, on Tuesday at 7:34 p.m., by the way, I sent, let's see, I sent
That's
one,
so bad.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 messages. 7 messages. Went ignored, of course. Completely went
I feel so
ignored.
terrible about that.
No,
I do.
no. I only
but
say
you
this
can't.
to tease you. And then yesterday at 2:07 p.m., 1, 2, 3, 4 messages. Well, it only took you 8 hours to get back to me on those.
Yeah. So I'm doing better.
Messaging
why
is messaging is one of those things that everyone expects to be instant, but I think it's absolutely fine to just kind of ignore them and let them go. I was talking to someone else who was trying to text me, and something really weird was happening. She seemingly couldn't text to my number, and she doesn't know why. She couldn't find me in contacts, but when she did an S-Lady search on her Mac, she could find me in contacts. And I could find the messages. I used search in messages to find the last time we had texted, and I sent her a screenshot and said, well, here's our most recent conversation. And when she searched on that conversation, she could find it. But something is not working in her contacts, and I don't know. She
Oh,
couldn't
wow.
text me. Now she can text me. And I said, well,
Now she can text you.
maybe just update your contact card for me, and then it would work better.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah.
Good gracious.
Yeah, it's a sinking feeling when you go in there and get a bunch of messages that you missed. It's like, I hate that.
Nobody minds. Nobody minds. So
I do.
People seem to get more upset over missed emails than missed texts. So I try to be better about responding to those.
Yeah. That's probably true, actually.
Yeah. It seems like there's a hierarchy of communication needs. If you just kind of casually need to reach out to someone, use social media. If you if it's a step up from casual but not quite urgent, use texting.
Yeah.
Maybe this is just my hierarchy.
Yeah.
And then if it's a little bit more important, if there's something, serious to discuss, use email. And if you get no response to any of those, actually pick up the phone and dial 7 digits and call them. Or, well, I guess it's 10 digits. 10 digits and call them.
Call them, yeah. Yeah. No, that's kind of, I always say that too. If it's really if it's an emergency or it's really necessary, call me.
Call me.
Yeah. Give me a call. But yeah, no, I probably am. My hierarchy would probably be about the same. I don't know if I would change email. Yeah, because you're right. It's like email and texting are kind of 6 of one, half time. I mean, I know there's a little bit more involved with email, so I think that might get people's notice a little bit more than. Although with so much junk mail, unless you have a decent email client to filter out that stuff, sometimes that can get lost in there too.
Or good email service. A lot of times it depends upon the service to filter out that email versus your client. Clients don't do as good of a job filtering. There are third-party add-ons you can get, third-party extensions and third-party services you can pay for, like Spam Sieve and things like that. But if you have a good email service that has excellent filtering, then it's less of a concern. Just check that spam box once in a while and make sure nothing important is going to it.
Right. Yeah.
A lot of folks like me, a lot of folks like you who have small businesses and have folks contacting them with support issues will explicitly say, and I do explicitly tell people this, if it's important, don't text me. I need some form of communication that is easily searchable and
Right.
I can
Right.
document better than texting. Texting tends to get lost, and
Yep.
I encourage people to reach out via means that are traceable. Maybe that's the right word.
Yep.
Traceable means, so that um, I don't lose it, quite frankly, and I don't want to
Right.
lose it. So okay,
Yeah. Texting seems to be to me a little bit more disposable, I guess, than emails are.
yeah,
It
certainly.
certainly can get lost in the the river down there. I mean, because you send a text, even just a few days ago, and that might be,
Oh, it's gone.
depending upon how
Yeah.
much person text, it could be a lot. Where, with email, it's a lot easier to find that, even if it's a huge threaded message.
Well, let's embrace the show, Eric. That's good.
Embrace.
That's going to mean something to folks in just a second here. But we're going to
Yep.
embrace for Mac Eyes Only and get started with our recording session. So, are you ready to go?
I am ready.
I don't know if you have anything
Just
different in your list than I have, but we'll just kind of go through it and
Yeah, probably not, but yeah.
cool. All right, then, let's get started. In 3, 2, 1. It's for Mac Eyes Only, episode number 403 for February 10th, 2023. Embrace the Mac. Hey everyone, welcome back to For Mac Eyes Only, the show for the Mac community, where we share our thoughts and opinions on current Mac news and events. And joining me to share thoughts on Macs is my For Mac Eyes Only co-host, Eric Erickson. Hey Eric.
Hey, Mike, how you doing?
I'm
ready to
doing...
embrace.
You're ready to embrace the
Yes.
Mac.
Embrace
And
the Mac. Yeah.
for any of you joining us live, we're going to be keeping an eye on the chat room too, the YouTube chat room. So if you have any questions or comments as we move along, be sure to preface it with a Q or the word question so that we can try to address it. Now, I don't know about you, Eric, but I have been seeing more and more blog posts from folks complaining about missing features in macOS. Now, the twist
Yeah.
is they're switchers. These are folks that are moving to the Mac from a Windows PC and finding that, oh, the horrors, the Mac doesn't work exactly like Windows.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if I'm
Go
seeing
figure.
more of these because I clicked on one article and now Google and Apple News seem to think that this is the only type of article that I want to read, or if blogs are actually recycling their articles and reissuing evergreen content, and it's just simply a coincidence that I'm seeing more of it. Or maybe it's a combination of both, quite frankly. But as you might expect, I find these articles annoying because, well, there are many reasons actually, but the biggest reason I find them annoying is that they seem to be arguing that rather than embracing the Mac and Mac OS for what it is, that the process of switching from PC to Mac is somehow made easier when the features that they expect an operating system to have, and these are expectations created through years of using Windows, by the way,
Right.
but the features they expect an operating system to have come along for the ride. Now, the reality of it is, my reality, I suppose, is I feel that they are actually making their lives harder. Not only,
Yeah, I do.
right? I mean, if you're trying to force an operating system to do something it wasn't designed to do, you're just making your life harder. And you're increasing your level of frustration with that operating system. The thing is, not only are many of these articles that switchers might come across filled with misguided and often flat out wrong assumptions about how the Mac works, but the very premise that loading up your Mac with a ton of third-party add-ons to make it work more like Windows, well, it not only adds overhead, but it makes it far more difficult to seek out help when help is needed. So, as I said a moment ago, forcing a different workflow on the Mac and not embracing the basics of how the Mac works. And,
Right.
the truth is this holds true whether it's Mac OS, whether it's Windows, whether it's a particular distro of Linux, which, by the way, actually invites modification and changes, or if it's iOS or Android. This holds true, but deviating from the intended use and purposely modifying an OS to work, not think, but work differently, makes me question why they switched in the first place. Now,
Yeah.
having said that, I want to be fair here. There are some folks out there that are forced to switch by their job, or worse, they need to hop back and forth between macOS at work and Windows at home. There are some folks who switch riding the high of a friend's recommendation, and then they find themselves a bit lost when the old PC has been set out to pasture and all they're left with is the rolling orange and red hills of Ventura and no idea how they got here. And then, of course, there are those who switch to take advantage of software that's only available on the Mac, like maybe Final Cut Pro or Logic, something like that.
Right.
So certainly there are times like those where adding a little extra help in the form of Moom or a better snap tool or something like that might be warranted. But I personally feel that embracing the way a Mac does things is going to serve someone much better than forcing macOS to operate just like Windows.
Right.
Now, when I suggested this as one of the topics this week, you kind of jumped on it and said that might be a good one to do this week. Have you been seeing similar types of things or hearing similar types of complaints from people?
Well, I don't know that I've seen anything super recently, but I have seen that stuff through the years, especially looking at software that it like you mentioned, Moom, and even what's a better Snap or Snap, software that's meant to like manage Windows the way that Windows does. I've seen that where people are just like, oh, this is so great because I really miss this about, you can't do this with the Mac and you da 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 da. And between that and a lot of misunderstanding kind of on how the Mac works or how the Finder works and how it, if you just, like you said, embrace it and just get used to using, there's that, the kind of, I guess you should say the lack of knowledge. And then there's also this outright, I want to say ignorance, but where they don't even know that particular feature that they thought only Windows had, actually the Mac has it as well, like copying and pasting a file or whatever, where it's like, no, that's there, you can do that. And so, yeah, I've seen enough of that through the years that it's kind of, I've seen the whole gambit. I think I saw something where somebody said they were glad that Microsoft created the cut, copy, and paste, with command and undo with command or Control Z, Control X, Control C, V. And I'm like, that was on the Mac. That was on the Mac well before, Windows.
Well before Windows, yep.
Because, yeah. And so, I don't know. There's just a lot of misinformation, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's always fun to point out that Microsoft Word existed on the Mac before it existed on Windows too.
I know it. In fact, I just was talking to somebody who's got like a 2015 iMac and it's running a little bit slower. And he was talking about, I think he worked with, PC or Windows at work. And so he was using this Mac now, but he needed to get a new computer. And he thought, well, maybe he would maybe he'd just go back to PC because he goes, there's Word on the Mac, but he goes, I don't know. I want to use Outlook and I didn't talk to him too much because I was going to help him later on. But, I was going to make that comment like, hey, Word was on the Mac before it ever showed up on on Windows. Well, even the PC, and at least the Word like we have today.
Right.
And no, yeah, you can get Outlook on the Mac as well. And Word, as far as Word's concerned, it's pretty much on par with its Windows cousin. I mean, it's not like there was a time where the
Mhm.
Mac version and the Windows version diverted it quite a bit, but that's kind of changed in 2016. So, um, but yeah, I know there is people get used to what they're used to.
Mhm.
And I think for a lot of people that just maybe look at a computer as a tool, they don't, um, it's hard enough for me to get people to use a password manager because it's like, that just seems like another hassle, even though what they're doing is much harder and less safe in the long run.
Yeah, password managers are a conversation we should probably have on the show in the future because that is a topic in and of itself. It is, admittedly, it's confusing. I'll
It
I'll
is.
say that when I first looked at 1Password, the way it's explained, the way it's described, I should say, on their site, and at the time it was Agile Bits, now they just go onepassword.com. But the way that it was described at the time, it was confusing to me what the intended operation of this was. What is the purpose of this software? How am I supposed to make this work in my daily workflow? You have to actually, like with macOS, you actually have to start using it the way it was intended, and then you start to
Right.
click and you start to realize, oh, okay, I understand now. I understand how this works. But the misconceptions that I had way back in the day when I started using 1Password still are happening for folks who are switching to 1Password now. There's a
Yeah.
misunderstanding of what 1Password is intended to do and how it's intended to operate versus how it does operate. So, yeah,
Right.
maybe that's a conversation we
Right.
should mark down for a future episode because I think a lot of folks who are hesitant to jump on 1Password or Bitwarden or any of the other password managers out there might make the leap if they have a better understanding of what it's intended to do.
Too.
Um,
Yeah. And what it
yeah.
can do for you. Yeah.
And, I mentioned a classic example a moment ago. Talk about switching from Windows to Mac OS. There is within the Android ecosystem a major rift between stock Android and Samsung Android. It's a
Right.
huge rift.
Oh yeah.
There is nothing, a few things, but there's really nothing similar in the way that settings works or how the basic structure of the, getting the operating system to work properly on your phone works. It's so different that someone who's used to stock Android has a difficult, if not impossible, task trying to help somebody who's using Samsung Android. And that sort of thing shouldn't happen. It shouldn't exist. It shouldn't be allowed for that to happen. But because of the open ecosystem that Android is developed within, it does happen. And it happens to a lesser
Right.
extent with other manufacturers, Motorola and OnePlus and those other manufacturers. It happens to a lesser extent. But when you come from the Google phones, whether it be the Nexus phones, back in the day or the Pixel phones now, and then you look at a Samsung phone, you actually question whether it's the same operating system at all.
Yeah.
And
It,
it, it
what-
it's that what I was thinking of when I said that if you try to force Windows ways of working onto Mac OS and then you seek out help, you're going to have a difficult time finding someone who understands what you're talking about because it's just not the
right.
way that the Mac operating system is intended to be used.
Right. Right. It's yeah, exactly. It's not, I mean, it's just a whole different, it's a different philosophy. And actually talking about Samsung Android versus stock Android, I was just saw this someplace and I didn't read about it, but it's talking about Samsung phones having more, I don't know how much the the stock OS and everything else was like like 2 installs of Ventura. Like it was so bloated with stuff that, I was amazed at that. I was like, "Oh my gosh," Yeah.
It
I
really is. And I
I
thought of this, and I was going to say this jokingly, but I'll mention it now. The one thing that Windows has that the Mac does not have, and I'll have to credit Microsoft with this fully. This is if anyone takes credit for this, it's Microsoft, and that is the number of unneeded apps pre-installed in a fresh installation of Windows, as well as all the advertising that Microsoft is now injecting into Windows. The Mac has none of that. So full credit to Microsoft for all that injection of ads and unneeded cruft
Right.
in the Windows operating system with Windows 11. Congratulations, Microsoft. You win on that one.
I wonder if former Windows users are missing that.
I bet they are. And if if they are, they should just load up Google Chrome. Just load up Google Chrome and you'll get all the ads that you want. They're happy to allow the advertising into their browser. Even if it's not part of the Google ad network. The pop-ups and scams galore on Google Chrome.
Yeah.
Anyway,
No kidding. Yeah.
So I thought what we would do this week, we'll just continue the intro. I thought what we would do this week is a bit of a twist on our tips and tricks episodes. And I guess a little bit of our essential apps episodes, although I'd like to stick with stock macOS as much as possible. But a bit of a twist on our tips and tricks episodes, really, in that rather than just running down a list of things that might make a typical Mac user's life a little easier, what we'll do is we'll run down things to make a typical Mac switcher's life easier. And if you're listening to this and you're a longtime Mac user, which I think most listeners of For Mac Eyes Only are, I know that there are some folks who switched who are tuning into the show, and that's awesome. I hope we can help you here today. But if you're a longtime Mac user, don't completely discount this episode, because I think this is going to help you too, especially when Aunt Jane out in Washington State gets her first new Mac and then calls you, the Apple user in the family, for help figuring out why her new Mac doesn't work like her Surface Pro tablet did.
Right.
So, with that said, I've got a list of some things that I found are some of the more common complaints. And I'm putting complaints in air quotes. I guess they are complaints. But common problems that people who've switched from Windows to the Mac are encountering. And when I saw this article last week that came up and then suddenly was presented with all these other articles, I took note of them all, and I kind of consolidated some of the most common issues that people were having and just listed them out today and try to provide an answer for folks who are having these problems. And the first one is something that you actually mentioned just a moment ago, Eric, and that was that, and I'm actually having trouble reading my notes because I didn't fix this since last episode. The font on this Mac is missing, so it's showing up as an outline font. Here, let me zoom in here 110%. Oh, that's much better. Okay.
Copy paste. Is that the...
Yeah. Okay. Here we go. A little cut, little edit point there. Little behind the scenes for the folks watching the live episode, but a little edit point for the audio show. So some of the most common complaints I found begin with the Mac is missing copy and paste for files in the Finder. Now, that's not entirely true. It's just different terminology. And I think that's what we're going to find is the case for a lot of these problems that folks are having, is that it's just understanding the difference in terminology and how things work between the two operating systems. To give a little background on this, in Windows Explorer, if you want to move a file, now that's the Mac terminology. If you want to move a file, you can, or files, you can select that file or files, and on the keyboard, much like you can in Word. If you want to move a word in a document, you can press on the keyboard Control X. That's a cut command. Just like you would cut a word in a Word document and paste it elsewhere, you can cut files in the Windows Explorer, go to the new location, and then paste with Control V. You can paste those files, and that is effectively a move command. And that's one thing. If you do a lot of file management and you're coming from Windows to the Mac, you might miss. Now, there are ways around that. You can drag and drop files. If you are dragging and dropping from one drive to another drive, that drag and drop is automatically a move operation. Wait,
Or
yeah,
copy.
that's a move operation. If you're moving from one drive to another drive, one storage drive to another storage drive. No, wait, I have that wrong.
That should be a copy.
It's a copy. I'm sorry. See?
It's a copy.
Even I'm getting it wrong. It's a copy. If you move from one drive to another, it's a copy operation. If you move from one folder to another on the same drive, it's a move operation.
The move. Yeah.
So if you have something in your downloads folder and you want to move it elsewhere on your Mac, just drag it from your downloads folder to that new location. If the new location is on the same storage drive, which it often is, then it's going to move that file. No Control X or Command X needed. It moves it to do that.
Right.
To go back to the other example, if you're wanting to move a file, let's say you're on a Mac with multiple drives and you downloaded something and you want to move that to an external drive, you can drag it to the other folder, and in doing so, hold down
The option
key, and
I
you'll
believe
see
so, yeah.
you'll see the drag operation drop the little green plus, and when it drops that little green plus, you know that it's moving the file. Or you could do it the keyboard way, which is what Windows users want. They want that Control X, Control V, and the way that we do it on the Mac, moving it from drive to drive, is you're going to select the file or files. You're going to press Command C to copy, and then go to the new location, and you're going to press Command Option V, not Command V, which would copy the files, but Command Option V to move them.
Move. Yep.
If you just press
And I
Command
think
V,
that's
you're going to
probably-
copy or duplicate the files.
You'll duplicate the file, right? You'll just copy it, right, instead of moving it. And I think that may be what some of these users are really looking at, because they know they can drag stuff, but I think where the keyboard operation is handy is when you're traversing through other folders to get your final destination. So it's something that it's not an easy drag. You actually have to dig through another folder, and then you can paste it, or you can move it there. And I think that's one of the big reasons for the keyboard thing and why people like that. But along with your dragging, maybe you were going to mention this too, but there is something that I use a lot, which is spring-loaded folders.
Yes.
This came from shareware a long time ago, but if you hold it over the folder, the folder will kind of flicker, and then it'll open up that, and you can go however many folders deep, just holding that file over, each directory or folder, and it will, you can just finally get to the folder you want to get to, and then drop it, and it'll copy there. That's something that's terrific. I love that.
Yeah. Spring-loaded folders is great. The only issue I sometimes have with spring-loaded folders is them getting away from me. In other words, I drag it to a folder, and it opens, and then it just so happens to open, and my cursor's over another folder, and it opens that one then too, and it just keeps opening folders until I get to where I need to be. I'm like, no, stop opening folders. Yeah. So it works, and it works great. A couple times I have it open one more folder than I intend. And, very often what I'll do in that case is I'll just go ahead and drop it and then I'll do the
Okay.
Command C and then Command Option V to move it to the folder
To move
above.
it wherever. There's a little bar where you can shorten or lengthen the spring loaded so it doesn't spring load right away on you like that.
Yeah.
I set mine to pretty much really long, and then I hit the space bar. If I
Oh,
wanted,
right.
if you hit the space bar, then it will spring load that folder, and so that's usually the way I use it to kind of get around the issue you were talking about.
Yeah. The other issue that folks have mentioned in the past is opening files in the Windows Explorer. If you have a file selected and you press return, that file will open. It'll fire up the app that
Right.
created that
Right.
file and
Yep.
it'll open. On the Mac, when you do it, it is going to go into rename. If you press return on a
Right.
file, it immediately goes into a rename mode so that you can rename the file.
Rename.
And that is often confusing to people as well. Now, this is where you can do a couple different things. One would be to use the keystroke Command O. So if you want to open a file, you're going to press Command O, and that will open the file in the app that created it.
Yep.
The other thing, of course, you can do, and we're going to talk about this in just a second, but you can Control-click or right-click that file and choose Open from the context menu, and that's another great way to do it as well. But that's something, that's a big difference between how Windows treats the return or enter key as you're working with files in the Finder versus working with files in Windows Explorer. So you want to open something, go ahead and do it. Now, the other way to do it, and this is one of my favorite ways to do it because I love this feature of macOS so much, is Quick Look. And that's something that's seriously missing in Windows. And I'd like to do an episode where we talk about what's on the Mac that's missing in Windows, kind of the reverse of what we're talking about today. But Quick Look is missing in Windows. And when I sit down to a Windows computer, I miss it sorely. I love Quick Look so much. If I don't know if this is the right file I want to open, pressing the space bar will give you a preview of that file. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah. Pressing the space bar will give you a preview of that file. And at the top of that preview, you have a little button that says Open. So if you're previewing a text file, it'll say Open with TextEdit. If you're previewing a movie, it might say Open with QuickTime. Previewing a JPEG file, it might say Open with Preview. Did I say that already? I might have said that already. But that is something that you can do. You can quick look a file or files. You can actually select multiple files. And as you are scrolling through them, as you are using the arrow keys to scroll through them, you have the option at the top to open that file. Now, there's other options too. While we're talking about Quick Look, features that Windows does not have, some of the things that you can do with Quick Look as well, you can share a file. So if I have a text file open and I'm sharing it, or I want to share it, I can just press the share button. If there is a file that you can do further things with, so let's say, for example, I'm quick looking a PNG or a JPEG file, you'll see that in addition to share at the top, a couple extra buttons open up in Quick Look that allow you to do things like rotate the image or mark up the image. So these are things that are built right into Quick Look that, and even, in the latest versions of macOS, you can even copy and paste text from images that you are viewing with Quick Look. So there's a lot of great stuff that you can do with Quick Look, not the least of which is simply opening up the files that you're working with. Okay, for those watching live, we're going to take a quick break here. Eric had to run off to take care of something, a delivery or something. So we're going to take a quick break, and then we will move on to our next common complaint from Windows switchers. think my list here, what do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I have 9 items on my list. I think that's a good list of things. Maybe while I'm waiting for Eric here, I'm going to go ahead and change. See if I can fix this. Yeah. Okay. This font thing is really driving me crazy. I'm going to go through and re-bold everything. I don't know why. I swear I have this font installed on my Mac, but for some reason, it's loading up as an outline instead of a bold. So I'm just going to go through and if I select it and I re-bold it with Command B, it turns off bold. So it's like it thinks it's bold. And then I press Command B again and it comes back as a proper bold. So I don't know what the heck is going on with the font on this Mac. I might have to open up Font Book and do a little font repair. I see Eric has joined us again. I'm entertaining people with fixing the fonts on my Omni outliner here.
Oh, don't let me stop you. I'm sure it sounds thrilling.
It sure makes it a lot easier to read. Everything on my MacBook Pro here is coming through as an outline. So anything that's bolded in Omni Outliner is coming through as an outline font, which a thin black outline on a white background makes it kind of hard to read the text.
Horrible.
Yeah.
I don't even know why they have that styling, to be honest with you. It's horrible.
It's awful. Yeah.
It is.
So I just wrapped up while you were off getting the delivery or whatever you were doing. I wrapped up the missing cut and paste file with Quick Look and the options that you have in Quick Look. Things like not only opening a file, but if you are quick looking a JPEG or a PNG, you can even mark up or rotate and do simple edits of a file right in Quick Look, which is just amazing to me. I love Quick Look so much.
I absolutely love Quick Look, and I always love showing it to people too, because in fact, somebody I was just working with on their Mac, they were looking through some files and I just happened to do Command Tab and I saw like just about every Office application was open and some other. I said, were you just looking at these files to see if you needed? And she's like, yeah. And I said, actually, there's an easier way. You can just quick look them. You don't have to open up. And, to think about that, that's actually been around since Leopard, which is 2007. So Quick Look has been with us for a long time. It's almost hard to believe it's been around that long, but
yeah.
It has.
I just love it so much. And, speaking of being around that long, there are actually extensions or add-ons you can install on your Mac to extend the functionality of Quick Look. If you have zip files on your Mac, I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head, but there's an add-on you can install so that you can quick look a zip file and see the contents of it. Not just see that it is a zip file and not just see the size of the zip file, but you can actually see what's inside the zip file. And those kind of extensions are great. And
zip file, yep.
In addition to trying to do something with the notification center, which I'm not quite sure that Apple is being terribly successful with that. But in addition to that, I kind of wish that Quick Look would have a more robust ecosystem, kind of like Dashboard did. Notification Center has never had that robust ecosystem the Dashboard had in inviting third-party developers to really add useful functionality to it. Most of the functionality to Notification Center just has not been terribly useful to me. And the fact that it's all one big long line of items and you can't necessarily see everything in one glance is problematic as well. But it would be nice if there was a more robust ecosystem.
You can only use it as like a... Right. I was going to say, it only uses like a quarter of the screen, if that.
If that. Yeah, you seem to be frozen. It happened when you came back.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, you froze for a bit, and which I'm not sure why, because everything was going slick. I've made sure to stay inside of Chrome, so
Yeah. You want to join and come back? Or disconnect and come back? Or
yeah, let me try that.
all right. Wee. We normally have these problems at the beginning of the show, so it's fun to have them at the end here or in the middle. We're kind of in the middle of the show now where we're having these problems. All right. Eric should be automatically rejoining. There you are. Well, you're much clearer now.
Yeah,
I don't know. Was the
look a little bit clearer anyway.
yeah? Did the Mac go to a screensaver or something?
No, that's the thing. And I'm using the guest account, so I don't have anything. I don't have anything set up like that, so it should just be. And like I said too, I haven't left the browser. It seemed like whenever I did that's when trouble. So I just always keep it on the foreground and
Yeah.
use
I'm
that.
watching the bandwidth stats, and we seem to be okay. I mean, we're not exceeding 3.5 megabits per second.
Yeah, it's got to be on my end. And what I could do is make sure to log out. I think I forgot to do that. Even though I'm logged into my guest account. Let's
Well,
see, can I log?
It's up to you if you want to.
Yeah, if it's working, let's keep trying it.
We'll keep going. All right.
Yeah.
Well, the next item on my list is kind of an interesting one, and I get it. I understand where they're coming from, where they say the Mac doesn't have a proper delete key. Where that's coming from is, well, it's coming from on full-size and laptop keyboards. Windows provides two different keys. They provide a delete key, which is effectively forward delete, and then they have what they call a backspace key. Okay, and backspace kind of comes from the typewriter world. That's where that comes from.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We've got that.
Well, exactly. But it's a terminology issue, and I think once you understand the terminology, it will make more sense. And this complaint seems to be, I feel as if one of the more popular Mac computers out there is the laptop or the notebook, as we used to call it. Now Apple has decided to call them laptops. But the
I know.
the Mac laptops is probably more popular than the iMac or Mac Mini, I would say. Especially,
I think the laptops are actually the most popular.
Yeah, with switchers especially. I think there's a big shift to Mac laptops, MacBook Airs, and MacBook Pros. And look, the Mac laptop has a key labeled delete. It doesn't have backspace, it has delete. Right. And if you think about it, it makes more sense. When you press delete, it does the equivalent of backspace.
Right.
It deletes the characters, where your cursor is, where your insertion point is. It deletes the characters to the left of the insertion point when you press delete.
Yep.
Now, on the full-size Mac keyboard that you might get if you get a desktop Mac, they come by default with a small keyboard. But if you get the full-size keyboard, there is a forward delete key labeled DEL, and that would be the equivalent. That would be the equivalent of Windows delete key.
Right. they either have DEL or even on the newer Mac keyboards, the full keyboards, they have the little. It's like it's almost like the backspace with a. It's got a box with an arrow pointing forward and a little X in it.
The symbol.
Actually,
Yep.
symbol. Yeah, it's got
Yep.
a symbol rather than the DEL, and I can kind of show you that.
Right. So in that,
Yeah. Sorry.
so you've got your arrow keys, and in the two rows above the arrow keys, the forward
Right.
delete key, or the equivalent to the Windows delete key, would be in that second row on the left. Is generally
Right.
where it is. I'm looking at a really tiny window right here, so I can't see it. But yeah, so it either has
See
the
it, but
little
yeah.
the little forward delete symbol, or it might actually say DEL, depending on the keyboard that you have.
DEL.
My keyboard says DEL, and I think it has the symbol as well. I'm not sitting there right at the moment, but that key is the equivalent of the Windows delete key. Windows has forward delete, and they have backspace. The Mac has delete, and then
Yeah.
it has, which is the equivalent to
Del.
backspace, and then it has
Right.
delete, which is the equivalent of Windows delete, forward delete. In other words, where the
Right.
insertion point is, where your cursor is, when you press DEL or the forward delete symbol, it will delete items or letters to the right of the insertion point. And when you press delete, which is above the backslash, that's the equivalent of the backspace key, and that deletes to the left of the insertion point, or to the left of the cursor.
Right.
And I think that's it. It's just a terminology difference. So
It is. Yeah.
just that key that you see labeled delete next to the equals key above the backslash, that's the equivalent to backspace. And again, I feel as if that makes more sense, because
I do too.
you're not backspacing,
No,
you're deleting.
you're just like you said, it's a typewriter thing. You're not backspacing. You're deleting, because
Right.
you're even if you have nothing there, you're deleting the space that was there. Whatever, you're deleting it. Yeah.
Right.
No, it's
Yeah.
it's a much better.
Windows
And then
Windows
also-
keyboard has its roots in teletypes and typewriters.
Yeah.
You know, that's and old mainframes, and that's where you
Yeah.
you might want to move the cursor back, and that's what backspace does. Except in Windows, it just so happens to delete, and the
delete.
the Mac operating system and its precursor, Lisa, and even
Right.
the Apple II. What did the Apple II have? The Apple II
Yeah, that's a
have
good question.
the symbol, or did it have delete? I can't remember. Anyway, it's newer. It's newer, and so when they rethought the keyboard, they labeled it and named it for the function that it performs.
Right. Which again makes sense. With you were saying with the MacBook Air, the MacBook Pro, whatever, the keyboards and the delete, you can do a forward delete
Yes.
with them as well, by holding the FN key, which I do a lot.
Yeah. The function key, or the FN key. Yeah. Yeah, if you want to forward, and you're right, I completely glossed over that, didn't I? If you want to forward delete on a laptop, it's FN, or function, and delete. So the one key performs both functions on the laptop, and on the full-size keyboard desktops, there's two different keys. Although on the full-size keyboards, you can still do function delete if you want to.
Right.
There is a function key on the keyboard, on the full-size keyboard, so that you can do forward delete using the one key. So if you're in the habit of doing that with the one key, doing delete and then function delete, you can continue to do that on the full-size keyboard. So again, it's a functionality and a terminology difference between the two. But rather than try to reprogram the keys or get third-party software that reprograms them to I don't even know
Right.
why or how you would do that, but rather than do that, just understand that delete is the equivalent to backspace, and then if you want to forward delete, it's function and the delete key. And by the way, if you want to delete a file, and maybe this is where some of the confusion comes too, if you want to delete a file in Windows Explorer, you can select the file and press delete, or the forward delete key. On the Mac, it's
Right.
command. You hold down command and
Delete.
press the delete key.
And it
So
moves it to the trash. Yep.
moves it to the trash. Exactly.
Yep.
Speaking of which,
And Command Option Delete will just delete it straight away.
good point. I always forget to do that. Quite honestly, I always forget to do that. There is a way to do that in Windows too, where you hold down Shift. You right click or Shift delete will delete it right away. I believe
Delete
it's
it right
Shift
away,
delete, right, in Windows.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's Shift, and so yeah, it's Command Option delete to skip the trash. Yeah.
Right.
Now, a lot of this can be done with a context menu. A lot of this can be done by right-clicking on a file or in a document or whatever and taking advantage of the context menu. And that is another point of confusion when people switch. Understandably so. When people switch from Windows to the Mac, there's a point of confusion thinking that the Mac does not have right-click. Well, it does. But they're right. It's different by default. So the way you do it in Windows is you simply press that right mouse button. And so many trackpads on Windows laptops have buttons on them. Now, modern Windows laptops do not. And we'll talk about that in just a second. But the mice on Windows typically have two buttons, a right click and a left click. And folks are just used to pressing right click. Well, they don't know, and Apple doesn't exactly advertise this, they don't know that the Magic Mouse has that too. In fact, the Magic Mouse has a scroll wheel as well. It's just not a wheel, and they're not physical buttons. It's a touch-sensitive surface. So by default, the mouse, the Magic Mouse, works like the old classic single-button mice. One click. That's it. That's what you get. And then maybe a few touch-sensitive type controls with swiping fingers and 3 fingers up and all that kind of stuff. But in general, Apple does not, and in fact, and it's not even in general, in fact, in point of fact, Apple does not enable secondary click by default. They just don't. The way to get a right click on a stock installation of macOS is to press and hold the control key, and while holding the control key, click the mouse. Boom, you'll get a right click.
Do
So
we
if
know
you,
why they don't?
I feel as if it might be tradition. I just feel as if it's just, this is the way it's always been, and this is the way it's going to be. I just kind of feel like it's a tradition. Can you imagine if Apple suddenly put a second physical button on the mouse, or if they suddenly enabled secondary click by default? I mean, the uproar
Right.
from
Right.
the long-term Mac users. Right. How dare you enable secondary click by default?
Now I have to turn it off. I know.
It doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, but it's not enabled by default. And I think that classic way of context, or pulling up the context menu by holding down control and clicking, is just the default. So that's there. And that's how you can do it by default. However, and for purposes of this conversation, I'm going to assume switchers have a new Mac running Ventura and don't have system preferences. Okay, I'm just going to put that out there. If you're not running Ventura and you still have an older Mac and you're looking for this functionality, it's under system preferences. But on a new Mac running Ventura, it's in settings. So to enable secondary click on a brand new Mac, you go into settings, you go into mouse, you go into secondary click, and you enable right click on your Apple or any other mouse. That's it. That's all you have to do. And now you've got right click, and it'll work exactly as the way you expect it. And you know what? That's what I do. I enable the secondary click on all my mice, and I use it all day long, constantly using right click all day long. And I probably rely on the context menus more than I rely on keyboard shortcuts. But the actual fact of the matter is that I, throughout the course of any given day, use a combination of both.
Yeah.
So yes, I do enable secondary click on my mice. It's a feature you have to know is there. It's not, they don't overtly come right out and say, oh, by the way, if you want to do right clicking with your mouse, this is what you have to do. You have to know that
Right.
feature is there. And then,
It-
you also have to know that to get a secondary click, otherwise you have to press and hold control. It's
Right.
not necessarily put in your face that this is what you have to do. So if you're switching from Windows, I get that. Right clicking with the mouse is one of those things that Windows users do all day long too. And it can be jarring to not have it when you first fire up your new Mac.
Right. And I get it from a traditional standpoint. I mean, it had the one button mouse for a long time.
Yeah.
And before OS 10 and now OS, and I said the Mac worked perfectly good with one button. It was designed from the ground up to work with one button. It was
Yeah.
something that they decided really early on, because it's the Xerox, I think, had like 7 buttons at the time, and they didn't want to have all that. And so then they added the control key, the hold on the control key for the context. But, I do think that at the time, now with OS 10 and Mac OS, I kind of think that, and even with the Magic Mouse, I know that it's got one physical button. I sometimes wonder why they don't just kind of have that on by default. But like you said, it could just be a traditional thing, and whatever. And who knows? Maybe it's not as necessary as I think. It's just something people get used to.
Yeah.
Even though I use the contextual menu all the time too.
Remember when we had the Mighty Mouse? And not only did we have the option to enable secondary click, but we actually had a physical third button. If you click the roller,
Yeah.
that little roller, that was a physical third button. And then you
Yep.
could even squeeze the sides. Remember squeezing the
Yeah.
sides of the mouse? That was bonkers. I never squeezed the mouse. I couldn't understand that. And it took effort. Like I had to lift weights before I wanted to squeeze the mouse. It was, and let's not even talk about the cruelty of that statement, squeezing the mouse. Oh my goodness.
I know. That's awesome.
The Mighty Mouse was great. I liked it, except for that ball accumulating dirt and having to clean it all the time. It was a neat mouse. It was a neat mouse. But and I know a lot of folks don't like the Magic Mouse. They feel that ergonomically it's not the best mouse in the world. I don't really have a problem with it personally. I actually kind of like it. In fact, I had a Magic Mouse for the Mac Studio when I got that. I had the old Mac Pro's Magic Mouse, and I decided to get a new one in black. OWC had them for $69, and so I got a replacement mouse or maybe they don't call it black. It looks black. It's like a charcoal gray and black top on it.
That's cool.
And I thought that matched my Logitech MX Keys keyboard better.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That's why I got that. But I really do. I really do like the Magic Mouse. I find it fits my hand well. And if you don't, well, there are certainly plenty of mice out there like the Logitech MX series, or Macally makes a whole bunch of neat mice.
Yeah.
And many of them have physical buttons on them. So if you prefer the physical buttons, if you prefer a physical wheel rather than the touch surface, and that's what I think I miss the most if I switch, is not having that smooth scrolling, not only up and down, but right and left. I use the right and left scrolling all the time on the top of the mouse. And I've looked at many, many replacement mice, and that's the one feature I can't really replace, is the right and left scrolling with the mouse.
Yeah.
If I could find something, anything that had a different, or a similar touch surface that worked the same way, I would do it. But you know what? The Magic Mouse does it, and it does it well. So I just kind of stick with it.
Yeah. As mice go, the Magic is really great. And that's the one mouse I have used and would use. I've never been a mouse guy, even back when I used balls, pretty much either the Logitech one with the thumb one or better, the Kensington one with the bigger trackball. And then once Apple came out with the trackpad, the bigger desktop trackpad that
Mm-hmm.
oops, I can never get this right. uh, that they've got out now, it's the one thing that I use all the time and I really like. If they didn't have that or it didn't work well, I probably would use, a Kensington trackball. I know they've got like a wireless one that's really good, and I don't know why. I don't know why and it's not that I hate mice. It's just I don't know. It was better. My hand worked better with the trackball, or like this now with a trackpad, and it feels more natural with me, or I can control it better, and so I like it. But
Yeah.
to each his own. That's why there's all this stuff. So I mean,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
great to have all these options.
I have two of those Magic trackpads, at least two. Maybe I have three, actually. I don't remember. But I don't like using them. I do not like using them. I
Yeah,
love using the trackpad on the MacBooks, but I do not like
isn't that
using the
something?
trackpad with a desktop Mac. I don't know why.
Yeah,
And
it,
so that, and then trackballs, don't get me started on those. The only one I've ever had any modicum of success with is the trackball for Missile Command in the arcade. Other than that,
yeah,
trackballs where I have to control them with my thumb, those
yeah.
I apparently don't
That
have
takes some getting used to.
I don't have the coordination necessary apparently in my thumb. And don't get me
I probably
started
don't
on my
anymore
left
either.
thumb. My left thumb's completely
Yeah.
useless, but the right thumb, I apparently don't have the coordination to do what needs to be done to operate a trackball effectively on a desktop computer. So I don't even try.
The reason why you could do the trackball and you could do it on because with Missile Command it was life or death. You had to learn it. You had to learn that trackball because you didn't want to die. And that's where you have to bring that with the computer too. If you
Yeah.
bring it where I don't want to die, I'll learn this trackball, then it'll work.
So it kind of comes back around to this conversation we're having about switching from Windows to the Mac. It's a life or death situation.
Right.
You have to embrace the Mac. If you don't embrace the Mac,
You'll die.
bad things will happen.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly. And you need to
exactly.
embrace it. Yes.
Obviously, we're
Exactly. No,
kidding.
that's
Now, one
yeah.
thing I wanted to
Well,
mention
we should
here,
title it "Embrace or Die."
that's a little too harsh.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to mention is something I mentioned at the top of this particular issue, and that is on Mac laptops. So on Mac laptops, this is actually identical to many modern Windows laptops, but the elusive right click on the Mac trackpad is a two-finger tap. So if you enable two-finger tap as secondary click, that quickly, for me anyway, quickly became muscle memory. I miss it when I don't have two-finger tap
Yep.
enabled, and I use that all
Yep.
the time on the trackpad on a MacBook. So if you want right-clicking on the MacBook, of course you can do Control and tap or Control click. It's not an actual click anymore on the laptops, but you can do Control click or Control
Right.
tap. And if you want the right click with just your fingers, you can do a two-finger tap. So that would work as well. And
Right.
that's also under
And
your settings, but under the trackpad settings.
right. And if you don't like that, I think there's some accessibility stuff in there where you can actually push on a corner of the trackpad just with like a single finger too. And accessibility has all the great hidden features, but yeah, there's more than one way. So
Yeah.
It's easy enough.
Now, here's a classic. This is something that folks commonly have issues with, and that is clicking the X does not exit an app. Clicking that red X does not exit an app. Well, the
Right.
fact of the matter is it is a little confusing because there are some apps that quit when you click the X, and
When you
settings
do
is one
click.
of them. Settings, system
Yep.
preferences, things that only have the need for a single window. Very often, when you click that red X, the app will quit as well. But the thing to remember is that the Mac is document centric. It's not app centric, it's document centric. It's meant to be. Now, Windows is also meant to be document centric, but because of its history and because of Microsoft's refusal to drop part of its history going all the way back to Windows 1, it's a bit of both. So you have this app or application or program, depending on which version of Windows you're using, way of thinking where the X controls the program. And then you have the issue where the X controls the document. So Windows is not just document centric; it's also app centric, and it can be confusing what's going to happen when you click that X. So in our example before, Microsoft Word, you can have multiple documents open at any given time. And controls like the red X or any of the controls in that documents window on the Mac are for that particular window or that particular document. They're not for the app. So if I have 10 Word documents open, clicking the X for that document's window is going to close that one document, leaving 9 open. And then it's going to
Just
prompt me
like
to
in the
save. Yeah, it's going to prompt me to save that one
right.
document if it wasn't saved yet. Which, by the way, that's another hint or tip for everybody, is if you have a document open and it hasn't been saved, you're going to see a little black circle in the center of that where the red X is.
Right.
That little dot in the center means that the document hasn't been saved. So if you're not sure if a document's, look for that
Edited but not saved.
that dot in the red circle, and if you see a dot there, that means it hasn't been saved. Press Command S or go to File, Save, and save it, or click it, and you should be prompted to save it. I just don't like to count on that. I don't like to count on that.
Yeah.
Now,
Right.
clicking the X in Windows very often starts this inescapable trap of needing to go through prompts for every single document that's open until they're all closed.
Yeah.
And
Right.
I'd argue, quite frankly, that the Mac's way is better and it's easier to understand.
Yeah.
When you can grasp the fact that that every application on the Mac uses the menu bar at the top of the screen,
That's the
that
thing.
that represents the open application. And as you switch between applications, the menu bar changes to adopt the menus for that application that you're switching to. And when you can grasp that concept, and that is admittedly very different than Windows, but when you can grasp that concept, then it starts to be more clear how the red dot, the yellow dot, and the green dot relate to just that document that's open, not to all the documents that are open.
Right. Just that window. Yeah. The Mac, the central menu bar for the Mac is the key. And like you said, and one of the things is when you click the red X or you click the X in Windows, that menu bar is inside that document or inside the window. If it closes, it closes that window, there's nothing else there. And there is no menu bar that says, hey, I have an open app, here are the menus. Yeah, you have the start, you have the taskbar, but it's not really the same. So in order to open up, you have to like relaunch the application to start up to open up a new document, and it's the same thing, whereas with the Mac, you close that window, you can open up a new document within that same application. You don't have to quit the application. But like you said, if there are applications where they are just one window and they just exist, like the calculator, for example, there's no reason for it to exist with without that window open.
Mhm.
Yeah, clicking that X does quit the app too. But
Correct. Yep.
yeah, like you said, I think it has a lot to do with the central menu bar in that, and also what you were saying, document specific, and those little stoplight up in the left hand side of your window is for that window, and it's not
Correct.
for the application. It's to zoom that window, to minimize that window, close that window, and that's really what it amounts to. And I think you can get that down. The rest will be pretty basic. But I see people do that all the time. They click the little red X up there and go on. Which since Mac is multitasking anyway, it doesn't really matter, I guess, except for you just have a bunch of empty applications running.
Yeah, and the Mac is very good about memory management too. So it'll do like it does on iOS and kind of partially shut down that app in the background if it's not actively being used in order to free up memory for what you're currently doing.
Yep.
Now, if you do want to fully quit an app, it's going back to the keyboard, it's Command Q. Command Q will quit whatever app is actively showing in the menu bar at the top. So, right at the moment, I have my notes open. My notes are in Omni Outliner. If I were to press Command Q right now, that would effectively do what Windows users hope to do with the red X. Pressing Command Q, if I had 10 documents open, would take me through that inescapable mess of having to go through and make sure I've saved each document because it's trying to close all the windows. So that's the difference. Command Q, or in this particular case where I have Omni Outliner open, I go to the Omni Outliner menu and then choose Quit. But Command Q is really your friend here. Command Q is the keystroke that you want to remember because that's the one that will quickly quit those apps. Now, I'm going to talk about a quicker way to quit apps in just a moment, and we're going to talk some more about those dots in just a moment. But one thing I wanted to mention is, and this should be a really quick one, Windows users seem to be confused by the Mac's, and I'm just going to say it, easier way to take screenshots. It's so much easier to take a screenshot on the Mac than it is on Windows. You remember back in the day on Windows, you had to press print screen. Talk about a relic from the days of Unix past. You had to press the print screen key, and I believe it actually still works if you do. But the actions that Windows takes when you press print screen are a little bit different now than they used to be. But you had to press print screen, then you had to open up something stupid like Paint, and you had to paste the screenshot in there, and you had to edit it down and crop it to what you wanted and all that kind of stuff. It was a major pain. And now Windows has the snipping tool, which works pretty well. I'm actually glad they added that to Windows. It's a really nice tool to have there. And then, I believe the print screen key does still do it, but it automatically opens it into an editing app, I think is the case. The Mac is a little bit different. I'd argue it's a little easier, but I think it will become easier as you start to do this. If you want to take a screenshot of the full screen, it's Command-Shift-3. Command-Shift-3 takes a screenshot of everything that's displayed on your screen right at that moment. Command-Shift-4 gives you two options. With Command-Shift, you press Command-Shift-4. The first option is to move your mouse cursor to an open window. And when you move it to that open window, you see it get highlighted. And if you go ahead and select that, it will screenshot just that open window. Even if that window is behind another one, you can screenshot that window by pressing Command-Shift-4 and then selecting it, by hovering your cursor over it. Or you can Command-Shift-4 and then click and drag to select a portion of the screen, which works really well if you're doing something like running Windows in a virtual machine. You click outside the virtual machine, you want to take a screenshot of what's happening in Windows, Command Shift 4, and then you can select that active window that's open showing your virtual machine or select a portion of it. It works well for that, but it works well for many, many different scenarios. Now, where it differs now, and this is relatively recent with macOS, is when you press Command Shift 3 or Command Shift 4 and you take a screenshot, what happens is now you get a little tiny thumbnail of that screenshot in the bottom of your screen. And you have a few seconds to take action on that thumbnail. If you click on it, it'll open in preview, and then you can use previews tools to crop it or mark it up or share it, do whatever you want to with it, save it to photos, what have you. It gives you a brief moment to do that. Otherwise, what it does is by default, it saves it to your desktop. Cool. It saves a screenshot to your desktop. The screenshot is labeled screenshot. It has the date and time on it, and they are by default PNG files. And that's so you can get transparency. So window transparency comes through with a PNG. It does not come through with a JPEG, and that's why you may want it to save as that. And by default, if you're capturing a single window, it actually puts a little drop shadow beneath it too, so that you have that. And that's, again, something you can do with PNG, but you can't do with JPEGs that don't have a transparency. There's no opacity with JPEGs like there is with PNG.
Right.
So if it's saved to your desktop, that's great, because then you can open, you can share it, you can otherwise edit it with Affinity Photo or Pixelmator or Acorn or whatever you want, Preview. You can edit it to suit your needs and do what you want to with it from there. I feel it's much more powerful. I feel it's far less confusing than the way Windows default screen capture works. With the exception, I will say, of the new snipping tool. I think the new snipping tool is a great addition to Windows. But again, that's a bit of a copy of the Mac's Command Shift 4. The snipping tool works very much like Command Shift 4. So if you've been using the snipping tool, get used to pressing Command Shift 4, because that is going to work most similarly to that snipping tool.
Snipping tool.
Yeah. So,
and then there's Command Shift 5, which even takes it another step further.
What does that do? I don't use Command Shift 5, Eric. Enlighten me.
It's like an all-in-one thing. It presents you with let's see, what is it?
I know what you're talking about. Is that the one that opens up? That will open up. What did I just do? I just press. Oh, yes.
Window. You can do a window. You can do a selection part of the screen. You can record. You can. It's like they stole it from Snagit.
Yes.
But yeah, you can do pretty much everything that screen grab does.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I do not use Command Shift 5. That is, you know what? That is more like the snipping tool, now that I think about it. Command Shift 5.
Oh, yeah.
Is much more like the snipping tool. You press that, you get a little toolbar on screen that allows you to not only capture a portion of the screen or the full screen, but you can also do a screen recording with it.
Right.
Which is really useful. And I forget that is there, because when I go to do a screen recording, I always open up QuickTime instead and start it that way. But ultimately, the tools are the same.
Yeah.
If you're doing the screen recording through QuickTime or you're doing it through Command Shift 5, I need to remember that. I for some reason, I can remember Command Shift 3 and Command Shift 4, but Command Shift 5, whoop, just completely out of my head. You still there? You still there? Hello?
Okay, everything is frozen on my end. I don't know if you can hear me, but I am going to hang up and I'll...
Obviously, you guys all heard that, so we're just waiting for Eric to rejoin us. Or rejoin us. Or rejoining us. That too. Our last episode, we did really well with that, didn't we? We didn't have any problems with the last one or even the one before. Now, you might be able to hear me a little bit in the background, and that's because Eric is now joining without earbuds or without headphones. Whoop, whoop, there. And, we found that Bluetooth headphones or AirPods are causing problems with this interview mode. I've had problems with the AirPods. I mentioned this last episode. I have had problems with the AirPods and any web-based type tool. So I can't necessarily say it's an Ecamm issue. I think it's kind of a, as Eric said, kind of a Bluetooth issue versus an Ecamm issue. But yeah, we've had some issues with that, and he's disconnected, and now he's attempting to rejoin, but I don't see him. So I'm hoping it wasn't an internet issue on his part. We'll find out here. And then we'll, excuse me, then we'll move on to, there. No need seeing the empty guest spot there, huh? Then we'll move on to our next one. We only have a few left here, but I think it's an interesting conversation. There are definitely differences. And, it's not to make light of anyone who's having these problems, but the goal here is to make the transition or try to help make the transition easier in general. I think when you can make the transitions easier, if you can help someone who's switching to Windows, there's Eric. If you can help someone who's switching to Windows, you can make that process easier, then all the better. Okay, so Eric is back with us. You're taking a little while. I was worried that maybe it was an internet issue or something.
I had to restart Chrome. Did you freeze?
No.
Everything froze on my end.
I could hear you.
It was probably, you did hear me what I said.
Yeah, I'm going to have to bleep that later.
Yeah, sorry. I wanted to make sure that you knew. It was probably because I went ahead and I did the Command Shift 5 to look at it. It's
Yeah,
like if
probably...
I leave Chrome for any, so
yeah,
I should have known better.
Well, anyway, Command Shift 5, cool tool, and definitely should be used. This cool. Next one, I don't even want to talk about this one because I will talk about it briefly, but I don't understand this at all. You know what I'm going to mention, Eric. I saw someone complaining that macOS is missing a start menu. Really?
Yeah.
Really? That's your complaint?
Right. You might, I know. It's, yeah. I mean, to me, the start, don't even get me started on the start menu anyway. Why anybody would, yeah.
Well, the reference was specifically...
I don't know, all the things to complain about. Why that?
Why that? They specifically mentioned they missed the simplicity of the start menu. And that's where they lost me.
I know.
Don't tell me you're missing the simplicity of the start menu. Now,
yeah.
Okay, let's talk about that for just a second. I was going to just make fun of it, but look, it's true. It's true. The Mac doesn't have a start menu. Thank goodness.
Right.
Now, what we do have is something that Windows doesn't have, and that we have a little Apple menu. And that Apple menu is always there in the top left of your screen, and it's there for accessing things like settings. It's there for shutting down your Mac. It's there for restarting your Mac. And yes, it's even there for force quit, because guess what? Apps crash. And when an app crashes, it doesn't matter if it's on Mac OS or if it's on Windows or Linux or what have you. You need a way to kill off that app that's crashed. And on the Mac, the keystroke for doing that is Option Command Escape.
Escape.
Option Command Escape. But if you can go to the Apple menu and click Force Quit, which again is something that Windows does not have, there is no easy way to get to a Force Quit like command on Windows without pressing Control Alt Delete first.
Right.
You have to do the 3-fingered salute on Windows before you can get any sort of command that allows you to kill off a running application. Well, no, that's not true.
Right.
You can right-click the taskbar and access it that way if you can access the taskbar. If you can access the taskbar. That's true. You can do it that way. But again, it's not terribly intuitive. It's kind of like some of the things we talked, like the right-clicking on the Mac. It's not terribly intuitive. You kind of have to know that you can do that. On the Mac, at least, you have that Apple menu that very, very clearly says Force Quit.
Right.
And that allows you to kill off an app that's gone wonky on you. Now, we also have, so that's the Apple menu. Now we also have Launchpad. I personally don't use Launchpad. It gives the Mac a very iPad-like way of viewing your applications. That is accessed by default via your dock. There's a Launchpad icon on the dock. If you remove it, like I do, if you remove it, then you can press the Launchpad key on your keyboard, which should be, it's like 6 stacked boxes. It's on the F4 key.
Right.
And
F4
so
key,
you press that, and by default, you just press the key. If you have your keyboard set up so that it defaults to the function keys, which you can do, then you have to press function or the FN key plus F4, and then you can get Launchpad that way. Or you can fire it up from your applications folder as well. Launchpad is in there, and you can fire up Launchpad from your applications folder too. And that's a neat way of accessing the apps on your Mac. It's not my preferred way. Preferred way, my favorite way of doing it actually is to add the applications menu to the right side of the dock. Now you notice that the dock has a little vertical line on it about, I'd say by default it's probably 3/4 of the way, maybe 80% of the way across the dock from the left. And you can place folders or files to the right of that line. So I will, when I set up a new Mac, add my home folder there, and then I'll set up, once you drag your home folder to the right side of the dock, you can right click it and say how you want to display it, and I display mine in a grid. And then the other thing I do is I open up the Mac's hard drive or the storage drive, and I drag the applications folder to the right side of the dock.
Yep.
And then in my case, I will right-click that applications folder, and I'll set it up in a grid and alphabetical. However, if you really want that ugly start menu vibe, then what you would do is you would set it up alphabetically and in a list. And when you set it up as a list, oh my gosh, that's your start menu right there. That looks like really the Windows start menu.
Yeah.
So if you really want something that looks like the start menu for launching applications, drag the applications folder to the right side of your dock, right click it, choose to sort alphabetically, and choose to display in a list. A little bit neater view is the grid view, but I think list view is going to look closer to the start menu.
You could probably even take it a step further. And well, I don't know if you could change the icon of your applications folder. You probably could use like an alias to it and make your icon, and name it start, and then make the icon look like a start menu, and then put that in your dock and switch it to list. And you might have a, not
even
not
better. Even better and unbelievably, there is an app you can download that gives you a Windows start menu on your Mac. Right. And I don't know.
Yeah.
My personal take on it is that putting your applications folder on the dock is probably the closest to a start menu that you should get on a Mac.
Get to. Yeah.
It's uniquely a Windows thing. I mean, look, even Microsoft is getting rid of it. So,
I know. I know.
you know,
They're trying to. I know.
when you argue for the simplicity of the start menu, I lose you on that argument. I just don't understand that. It's
Right.
not simple in any way,
Right.
shape, or form. And you know,
No.
hey, look, let's talk about it. Installing applications on the Mac is, in most cases, a drag and drop operation. When you want to get
Exactly.
rid of an app that's in your applications folder, you select it and you drag it to the trash, or you press Command Delete. Boom, it's uninstalled. There's no uninstallation at all. You simply drag
No.
it to the trash. And in
You
most
don't have to run
cases,
to add remove programs. Yep.
none of that. None of that. You need access to your applications folder, period. And, you know,
Yep.
let's even point out one thing further. You can move or run applications from anywhere on your Mac. They don't have to reside in the
Right.
applications folder. You can drag it out of your
No.
applications folder to the desktop. You can run it from a secondary storage drive. You can have applications anywhere on your Mac that you want to. They are essentially, for want of a better term, a container. Each app that you see is a container that contains the files
Right.
necessary to run that app on your Mac. And
Right. It's a package. Yep.
it's a package file. You know, but
Right.
for folks who are switching over, just understanding that it really
Container.
it is not itself the application. It's what's inside of it that is the application and the files
The
that are needed by
application.
that
Right.
application to run. So yeah,
Right.
you can put it anywhere on your Mac and run it from there, and it will run fine. And you can even have multiple copies of the same app, different versions or beta versions, and run them from different locations on your Mac, or even run them from the applications folder, and they will each run independently and separate from each other. And I just think that's
Right.
amazingly great, and it's not something that has been replicated at all in the Windows world.
No. 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 Absolutely not. Yeah.
So here's one that's fairly common, and I guess I never really understood this. I don't use this functionality on the Mac that frequently. I do from time to time, but the complaint is that Command Tab on the Mac does not have little thumbnail previews on it. Now, that's
Oh,
true.
like right. Like Alt Tab
Yeah. If you
does. Right.
Yep. If you Alt Tab on Windows, it didn't used to do this. It's a fairly recent thing.
No. It is
But
a
if
fairly recent.
if you Alt Tab on Windows, you'll get little previews of what's behind that app in the little tab bar there.
From the start bar or the task manager. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
So
task bar. Yeah.
when it's like a task switcher. If you think of Command Tab
Right.
or Alt Tab on Windows as a task switcher, so you can switch between running or
Yep.
open applications on
Application switcher.
your computer. And when you're using Alt Tab on Windows, as you're Alt tabbing between the active applications, you'll get a little preview of what's running behind it.
That app looks like. Yeah.
Yeah. On the Mac, you just get an icon. You just get the
Right.
icon
And
for
you
that
get,
app. Yeah.
generally speaking, yeah, there's some applications that, like, if you're like downloading or doing whatever, they'll show you a status that it's down or processing or whatever. But generally speaking, it's just that icon only.
Just that icon. And so I think
Generic static icon. Yeah.
Yeah, the core of this complaint is that you're not getting the previews. So I get that, but I'm going to argue that it doesn't need to. We actually have something better on the Mac. And that thing that we have on the Mac is called Mission Control.
Yeah.
And with Mission Control, we can, at a keystroke, see every single running application on our Mac and every single window that application has open on our Mac with a single keystroke. We don't need to Command Tab. We just need to open Mission Control, which again on the Mac by default is the little symbols above the F3 key. Or in my case, I press F9. That's a kind of a classic keystroke for it. But I press F9 and I can see in one screen or multiple screens, if you have multiple displays, a preview of every single app that's running and every single window for those apps. And if you want to only see, we'll go back to our example of 10 Word documents being open. If you only want to see those 10 documents, previews of those 10 documents that are open, you make that the active application and then press F10. And you will see
As the app expose. You only see that app.
Yep. It's an app expose rather than an expose for all the apps. It's just for that single app that you have selected or is active, the active app.
Right.
When you press app expose, you get only the open windows for that app. This is far better than anything that you get with Alt-Tab. And that's not even to mention the new Stage Manager, which is an entirely new way of working with open apps on your Mac. But if you're talking about just seeing what's running and switching from one running app to another, or in a particular window of a running app, Mission Control is far better than Command Tab ever will be. And certainly better than Alt-Tab on Windows.
Yeah. And I know the preview thing, and it is kind of nice on Windows, because I do use Command Tab a lot, but you're right. Expose, Mission Control has that beat hands down. There's no other way to say it. However, there is something I know, people complain, you can do media control within that preview. So people will say, well, I'm playing Spotify and I Alt-Tab, I can bring up the Spotify preview and I can click play or pause or rewind or skip a track, whatever. Where the Mac doesn't have that. And I will say, I don't know about the case of Spotify, but actually, I think the Mac does have that.
It has a notification
center.
Yeah.
Yeah, the notification center and the control center usually has a now playing thing, which will allow you to control that, whatever's playing. So whether it's Spotify or whether it's Apple Music or whatever, or your music app, you should be able to control it within there. But also, I was going to make mention too, and I know we were kind of keeping this just the Mac, but there is something called HyperDock, which basically emulates that Windows preview thing. It's like a $4.99 app or whatever. But does the same thing that the Windows thing that they're talking about. But even so, I think you've just made a big case for it. Use Expose. It's much better anyway, or Mission Control. And if you have the need for a now playing thing, that's in the control center, or like you mentioned, when in the notification center.
So it's again, as with all of these things, it's just a different way of working. And embracing macOS, embracing the way that the Mac does things, you're going to have a much better experience. And understanding, or taking a moment to explore Mission Control. If you want to find the settings for Mission Control on a new Mac, it's under Settings, Desktop and Dock, and then Mission Control. And then if you want to change the shortcuts like I do, I set mine, they're kind of classic shortcuts. You can stick with the defaults. But on mine, I have F9 set to show all running apps, the kind of classic Mission Control view. I have F10 set for app expose, where it shows you just the windows for the currently, active app. And then I have F11 set to show desktop. And I use show desktop all the time. That's great for dragging and dropping files. If I know that there's something on my desktop and I need to open it, I can press F11. I can go open that file, and then sometimes the desktop will auto, things will come back again. And sometimes you have to press F11 to get your apps back. but F11 Show Desktop is something I use all the time. I love it. And that can all be done under Settings,
Yep.
Desktop and Dock, and Mission Control. And then
Yep.
there's a little
Yep.
button called Shortcuts. And when you click that Shortcuts button, you can see the current keyboard shortcuts, or you can modify them like I have.
Right.
Um,
And and now, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, not to plug the trackpad again, but the mission control stuff and the show desktop, even the launchpad stuff, you can do with gestures on your trackpad. Of course, definitely with your MacBook Pro, but also if you have a desktop trackpad. So those are all really handy to use and access. No matter how you have it set up, whether it's a keystroke or with a gesture, they all work great.
I think, isn't it 3 fingers up on the trackpad is for mission control?
Yeah, I use the 4-finger
Okay.
because I use 3-finger drag, but yeah, 3 fingers, whatever. Yeah,
I think that's the default. You know what? I don't know because I
It
don't
is.
use
it is the
those
default. 3
that
fingers.
much.
Yeah.
It is something we're
You've
going to
got,
talk
like,
about in just a moment. But yeah, I think it's 3 fingers up is what activates mission control by default. Now, I mentioned a little bonus tip here, and this might be for longtime Mac users who don't know this. And it's something I need to be reminded of from time to time because I do not use Command Tab a lot. But when you Command Tab and you get your list of icons representing the running apps, when you have an app highlighted in that list, so as you're Command Tabbing through the list, when you have an app highlighted in that list, you can simply press the Q key on your keyboard and it will quit that actively highlighted app.
Yep.
That is
Yep.
slick. I love that feature. And if you
very
need to
slick.
quickly close something out, just Command Tab to it, press Q, and there you go.
Yep. That's a very, very nice thing. I use it all the time.
So I have 2 more on my list here. This is one that I see fairly frequently, and I do understand where they're coming from because there isn't technically an equivalent to this, although I would, again, argue there's better ways to do this. But the argument is that it is so much easier to quickly rearrange and snap windows into place on Windows via both keyboard shortcuts and click and drag. Cool. I find window snapping to be an annoyance. I'm sometimes dragging windows around and they want to snap to the edge of the screen, and I'm like, no, I don't want it snapped to the edge. Just stop it, Windows.
Right.
And it really bothers me. I personally am not the type of person that wants all my windows laid out like tiles on my screen, like some sort of mosaic tile work. I don't feel like I get the best of any given application when I do that. I am an overlapping windows kind of person. That's how I prefer to do it. Now, if you want tiled windows, if you like that mosaic look, there are apps that allow you to manage your Finder windows on the Mac. There's Warp, which is something I've been playing with. Warp allows you to save the window position. So if you get your windows lined up just like you prefer them, and you want to save that so that you can quickly replicate that layout, you can use Warp to save those Windows positions and then recall them. So you can set up multiple different window positions on your Mac and use Warp. You'll have a whole list of different Windows positions in Warp, and you can just select the one you want, and then boom, 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 they open and move to where you want them to be. So that's kind of cool. There's Moom. There's Moom, which I mentioned. There's Magnet. There's Rectangle. There's Better, what did I say earlier? Better Snap Tool. So this is clearly a thing on the Mac. But by default, it's not built into the operating system. By default, the Mac has a feature that allows you to, when you use the green button, you can either tile a window to the left of the screen or tile a window to the right of the screen. So the easiest way to do that is to simply hover your cursor over the green button. By default, you're going to see enter full screen, and then you're going to see tile window to left, tile window to right. And if you hold down the Option key, you're going to see Zoom. And I'm going to talk about the differences between those in just a minute.
Yep.
But you're going to see Zoom, and you're going to see Move window to left side of screen or Move window to right side of screen. So Apple kind of has snapping, but in a very limited way. You can either snap, to use the Windows term, snap a window to the right or snap a window to the left, but that's about it. That's really the limits of where macOS is with that right at the moment, without getting a third-party tool like Warp, Boom, Magnet, Rectangle, Better Snap Tool, what have you. Those will let you do exactly what you're doing on Windows. But my argument is that if that's your thing, cool, get the third-party app or use the built-in macOS, snapping to the right or left of the screen. My take on it, and I'll be interested to hear your take on it, Eric, but my take is to embrace overlapping windows. Just accept the fact that overlapping windows exist, that you can set windows to the sizes that you need. If I want notes to be a certain size and I want Omni Outliner to be a certain size and the various windows from Ecamm to be certain sizes, I can set them to that size, let them overlap, and then use our friend Mission Control to show not only all the open apps that are running on your current desktop, but to show any full screen apps that you might be using as well. And full screen apps are those where when you just click the button, and again, I want to talk about this in just a second, but when you just click that green button, an app goes full screen. Well, Mission Control will show you not only your current desktop or other desktops that you set up, but it will show you those running full screen apps as well. And then if you're really on the cutting edge, you can give Stage Manager a whirl. But my take on it is to use overlapping windows and just get used to using Mission Control. And I just find that to be the most functional way of working. Not only can I see as much of any one given app as I want to without having to worry I need to fit it within a particular grid, but I can also easily switch between them. I can drag and drop files between them using Mission Control. I can see just the running windows for any particular app. It's so much more functional than snapping windows to various corners of the screen, in my opinion. What do you think?
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I would say if you've got a specific need for two apps, to use Apple's split mode, you can drag stuff back and forth. You can, look at one, refer to one while using another, doing whatever. That works really, really well as well. But like you said, I think Mission Control is probably your best bet, and just have overlapping windows. I mean, that's really Apple gives you a lot of different ways to deal with your windows and window management. And I am like you. I really got annoyed with the magnetic window snapping. I moved just a little bit too much to the top, and all of a sudden this thing expands out. And the only thing good about it was usually I could revert it back. But I know I don't need that. It's just I know I never really found that useful. Not nearly as much as Mission Control. And I guess to each his own, but
well,
I just think Expose is just a lot better manager.
I feel it is. I really feel like once you understand all the power that's built into, and we're using the term expose, that's an older term, Mission Control. When you embrace that power, for anyone who's looking for expose in the settings, we should probably call it Mission Control. When you embrace the power of Mission Control, and Apple used to use both terms, by the way, then I think you really come to appreciate it more. I don't understand the desire or need to snap windows into some sort of weird grid on a small 13-inch laptop screen. I just don't get it. I kind of get it on big screens. If I got a 32-inch display or even a 24-inch display, I kind of get it. I understand that. but I still prefer the overlapping windows and just having as much information on my screen as possible without
Yeah.
compromising the amount of information shown.
Right. Right. And not having to scroll all the time just to see. No, and I'm not saying there could be some niche case that you do need to have these windows like this, but for the life of me, I can't think of what it is. But, I'm
Someone
sure
can
there's
tell us.
probably something. So,
Yeah, someone can
yeah.
tell us. To your point, Apple's way of doing it is fairly well thought out. I think it's a nice balance
Yeah.
between someone wanting to have a grid of apps on their screen and someone just simply wanting to copy between two different apps. The balance that Apple has taken here kind of answers my concerns with being able to see as much of a document or an open window as possible while contrasting that with the need to easily drag something back and forth from one to the other.
Right.
When the windows are too small, it's a compromise all around. But when they're side by side,
Right.
yeah, I feel like that is a good balance of the need to snap and the need to have as much information visible as you might want.
There has been times I've used that, and the good thing about the split is you can dynamically resize each window, by moving left or right. So if you
Yeah.
move that to left, it makes the right side bigger, it makes the left side, so it is different than just even lining up two windows and doing whatever. I mean, you can make it kind of work for you, and it's not something I use a lot, but it is something I have used on occasion, but otherwise I just pretty much use mission control or just standard multitask. I mean, the standard overlapping windows. I mean, I just and use in command tab back and forth. I mean, it works great. Or command apostrophe to switch between the same switch between windows in the same application.
Yeah. Yep.
Or possibly, I think it's command tick or whatever that mark is.
Oh, yeah, that's a keystroke I don't use.
Yeah, it's right above the tab key, right by one.
Yeah.
But if uh, you with the command key, it'll switch. Let's say you have your 10 Word documents open, it'll switch between your 10 documents in Word, cycle through all those without leaving Word.
Okay. So it's the command tab of an individual app window or individual apps windows.
Right. Right.
Interesting.
Right.
Yeah,
It's
I
like
don't
the
use
app
that.
expose, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. I use app expose. I never looked for a
No.
keyboard equivalent of that.
Yeah.
All right, let's wrap things up with let's keep our focus. Let's stay on theme here. Let's wrap things up with those our three buttons, our three friends in the corner, the red, the yellow, and the green. And one of the common problems I see people have when they switch is how that green button operates on the Mac. It didn't always work the way it works now. This is fairly recent,
Right.
probably 4 or 5 versions of macOS at this point. I don't know when it
Right.
made this switch. I can't recall exactly. But at some point, it used to only be what we call the zoom button. And then
Zoom button. Yeah.
Apple changed it to allow an app to go into full screen or allow an app to zoom. So the argument is that making something full screen sometimes takes the user to another desktop. Okay.
Mm.
That's how I've seen it written. So I want to clarify what's happening. I understand what they're saying, but I want to clarify what's happening. So there isn't really a full screen button for any given window on the Mac that makes an app the equivalent of full screen on Windows. When you click that button on Windows, what's happening is it takes that window and it makes it fill up the available space on your current desktop. There, that's the
Right.
right way to say
Right.
it. It makes that window fill up the available space on your current desktop. On the Mac, when you click that button, what happens is it's called full screen mode. And so that's technically different than another desktop. You're not really pushing that app to another
No, it just
desktop.
fills up the screen.
It
It's
just
just
fills
that
up
app
this.
now takes up the whole screen.
Right. I understand why the assumption is that it's another desktop, but
It's not.
it's not. It's not a separate desktop where you might be running multiple apps in a single workspace, but it's a full screen window for any given app. So it's different from another desktop, but for Windows users, just clicking the green button as is much closer to what they think of as full screen. So if that's what
Right.
you're looking for, if you want to make an app full screen, to fill the screen with an app, then the default click of the green button is what you're looking for. Click that button, make
And
the app full screen, and that's pretty much the equivalent of full screen on Windows.
yeah. And it kind of like to bring home the point as far as it not being another desktop. If you go into mission control, if you make an app full screen and you go into mission control and you go up to the top where it shows the desktops, the desktop, if you hover your mouse over it, it'll show a little X up in the upper left-hand corner. And a
Mhm.
full screen app, it'll show, instead of an X, it'll show like the little the arrows pointing inward to make it smaller. So when you have the two arrows pointing outward to make it full screen, two arrows pointing inward to make it not. And so you can see that difference right there. And by clicking the two arrows inward, it'll just shrink that app down into a single, onto whatever screen it was on before you made it full screen.
A floating window, as it were. A floating window
Right,
on your
right.
primary desktop.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then, to continue that little green button, the way it used to work, and you can still get it to do this by combining the click with the option key, is zoom. So zoom very often works the way that Windows users expect. Basically, when you click the green button and tell it to zoom a window, it asks the active window to fill the screen, but it does it in a way so that it optimizes the width for the content that's being displayed. So
Right.
sometimes it fills all the available space, and sometimes you find that it only increases the height, but the width stays the same or only adjusts slightly.
Yeah.
And that, in the old days, was a point of contention for switchers because the button was only a zoom button. And when people clicked that button and it only increased the height but didn't increase the width, or it did increase the width but it didn't fill the full width of the screen, there was confusion because zoom in Windows forces it to fill all the available space. And while some apps will
Right.
do that, Notes, for example,
all will.
if you click zoom in Notes, it does tend to fill the full screen. If you click zoom on a Word document, it tends to only fill the height and not the width.
The width. Yep.
So it's optimizing that document. Rather than leave a whole bunch of empty space on the side of this document that you're working on, it keeps the width optimized for what you're working on and increases the height. So that's kind of what zoom does versus full screen. Now, the way you switch between them is when you hover your cursor over the button, by default, it's going to go full screen. So if I click on any given window and if I click that green button, it'll make that window go to a full screen. So when it's full screen, your dock disappears, your menu bar disappears, you only see that app's window filling your entire screen. If I hold down the option key, you'll see that there's an option for zoom, and that gives you the old behavior of maximizing or optimizing the window to fill the screen in the best way. So How do you switch between all those? Well, switching is easy as you said, Eric, going back to our old friend Mission Control. You fire up Mission Control,
Yeah.
you'll see a bar at the top of your screen that shows not only any active desktops, because you can do separate desktops, separate workspaces. Think of a desktop as a workspace where you might organize work-related apps versus personal-related apps versus maybe social media apps or whatnot. You can do that. You can set up multiple desktops, but you can also have full screen apps displayed on that bar. So you can switch between desktops and you can switch between your full screen apps when you fire up Mission Control and see that bar at the top of your screen. And it's a nice quick way to switch between them. You can also swipe on the trackpad to switch between full screen apps. So if you have all of your apps running full screen or a handful of them running full screen, I believe it's a 3-finger swipe on the trackpad or 2-finger swipe.
Yeah.
You can also do it with the mouse to switch between your full screen apps as you have Mission Control open. So it's actually very easy to switch between them once you understand that full screen app is probably most similar to clicking full screen on Windows, but
Yes.
with Windows, you keep the taskbar at the bottom. You're really just filling available space for that window, and a full screen app on the Mac fills all the space. It takes up the entire screen, which is why there's often a misperception that it's a separate desktop.
Desktop, right.
Does that make sense? I think it makes sense.
No, it makes total sense. Yep.
We'll find out later after people listen to this and say, yeah, you didn't explain that very well, Mike. But that's really the difference. There's 2 modes to that green button on the Mac versus 1 mode to the green button on Windows. On the Mac, you can opt to make an app full screen, or you can opt to click zoom with option click and have it just fill the available space in an optimized way.
Yep.
So there you go. What other items might you have heard that we didn't cover today, Eric?
You know what? I think we've got everything. I can't think of anything that you haven't brought up.
Well, we certainly have covered a good chunk of some of the most common complaints. I know that there are other issues that people have as they switch from Windows to the Mac, but I think the core message that you and I are trying to share here is just embrace the Mac, embrace macOS, embrace the way that the Mac does things, and it won't be immediate. I find that a lot of times that switching process and getting the muscle memory in place to work the way the Mac asks you to work takes somewhere around a week, maybe 2 weeks of using it. But once you've reached that point, once you've reached the point where it becomes second nature, and then you go back to a Windows computer, you start to wonder why you can't do things like Mission Control. You start to wonder why you can't do things like Quick Look. And you start to realize that, hey, it might be different, but in a lot of ways it's better. So rather than complaining that something is missing, don't complain it's missing. Try to find out how to do something equivalent on the Mac, and oftentimes you'll find it's better.
Yep. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. No, and I think we've kind of shown everything today. There's usually always an equivalent or near equivalent to some Windows function on the Mac. And like I said, I think just like you said, Mission Control, Quick Look, there's really nothing like them, for anything on Windows.
Well, I think what I would like to do is on a future episode, and maybe not the next episode, but I think on a future episode, I'd like to kind of do the reverse of what we did today. And that's talk about some of the things, and we did a little bit today, but talk about some of the things that the Mac has that Windows doesn't. We certainly touched on some of the things, but I feel like there's a lot more to touch on that someone who is switching or thinking about switching might hear and say, oh, hey, that's really cool. That would be a good reason to switch. And there's a lot of it. There's a lot of stuff on the
There is
Mac
a
that
lot of
just
it.
simply doesn't have an equivalent on Windows. And you know what? You mentioned it briefly, but accessibility is huge. There's
Yeah,
so
that's huge.
much to the Mac operating system that you and I don't get to experience on a daily basis, but makes it so much easier for folks who have the need to use not only the Mac, but to use the iPhone and the iPad as well, not to mention the watch.
Right.
And that's thanks to
Right.
Apple's focus on making accessibility a top priority. And you know what? There are features of accessibility that make the Mac easier to use for you and I as well. And I think touching on some of those
Exactly.
features might be good too. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
there's room in a future episode to talk about that as well.
Nope.
But
I totally agree.
in the meantime, I think that's going to do it for this episode of For Mac Guys Only. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Remember, we do love to get your letters. So if you have any comments about the show, a tip to share, a software or hardware problem with your Mac, or maybe there are some switcher tips that you would like to share with me, well, be sure to leave your
Yeah.
favorites in the comments for this week's show notes found at formaceysonly.com, or drop me a line, Mike at formaceysonly.com. And Eric, you, of course, can always be reached at
Eric at formaceysonly.com.
Awesome. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. Thanks to Eric for joining me this episode. Stay subscribed, and we'll talk to you next time. How's that?
Cue the music.
Cue the music.